Hi, this is Richard Vague with Tychos. Today's topic is Beware Economic Headlines. Last week, the U.S. Census released their annual poverty report, and the headlines blared, quote, U.S. poverty rate jumped in 2022, child poverty more than doubled, end quote. Those headlines were technically true, but they were misleading. We subscribe to a lot of newspapers and other news sources, as I'm sure you do, and we scour them daily for economic news. We are regularly surprised at how contradictory and misleading they are, contradictory with each other. For example, we will see a headline on growth in consumer debt, which is an area of particular focus for us, and on the same day and for the same data, one news source will report the trend is alarming, another will report the trend is record-breaking, and a third will report it is sanguine and unexceptional. As regards to last week's poverty headlines, ABC News reported that, quote, the poverty rate in the United States increased last year, the first increase in 13 years, according to the Census Bureau, adding that, quote, in 2022, the poverty rate was 12.4%, up 4.6% from 2021, according to the Supplemental Poverty Measure. The story further read, quote, the poverty rate among children saw a sizable increase, more than doubling from 5.2% in 2021 to 12.4% last year, census data shows. CNN's Jake Tapper even cited with concern the fact that child poverty had doubled in an interview he conducted just after the report was released. Let's look at that data. The supplemental poverty measure they cite was just created in 2009 as a refined measure of the original poverty measure. We can see that, though the poverty rate was up, it was still below the rate in 2018 and well below the peak of 16% from 2012. And child poverty rate did double, but it was still below the 12.5% level of 2019 and the peak of 18% from 2012. The underlying fact was that COVID relief measures actually pushed poverty rates down temporarily but significantly. But most of those measures have expired. We can also look at the census official poverty measure as opposed to the supplemental, and here we see that overall poverty and child poverty rates are still below the rates of 2018, well below the rates of 2010 during the throes of the global financial crisis, and far below the peaks of 22.4 and 27.3 in 1959 when these measures were first recorded, which was a point just before America's anti-poverty programs of the 1960s. So our recommendation is that you be careful about taking news reports at face value. Most suffer from a, quote, most recent data point, end quote, bias, leaving the often unstated impression that the most recent data point is representative of the future trend. We believe it's impossible to judge most economic numbers except in the context of a longer horizon of time, benchmarked against some larger marker such as GDP for debt data as one example, or normalized by benchmarking against some other similar statistics, in this case against other countries. Here's where the poverty data gets more interesting and instructive. The source for this data is the OECD. Here we see the U.S. poverty rate set against the poverty rates of Britain, France, and Germany, where you can see that the 2019 pre-tax and transfers poverty rate in France and Germany are among the highest at 37% and 32% respectively. However, when we look at 2019 post-tax and transfers poverty rate, the U.S. sits atop the group at a level of 18%. We show this for child poverty as well, which conveys a similar story. The difference between the two charts is primarily the large social benefits provided to French and German households, which we will discuss in detail in a future video. By the way, some news sources did a better job of putting the data in context, but even the best don't always do the digging. It takes time and effort to properly evaluate most economic data, and at least some reporters don't do much in that regard. And if they don't, how can we expect ordinary readers to? Don't get us wrong, poverty is too high and inequality is increasing. Our point is simply that it's important to get a deeper understanding of the reported data. The U.S. Census Poverty Report comes out annually, and next year's report, which won't come out until the end of summer or early fall next year, will be particularly noteworthy. And the data may indicate that poverty is again increased, given the full expiration of COVID relief. Note that if you have questions, comments, or concern about economic data you come across, you can always send your questions to us at contact@tychosgroup.org. We'd be happy to help. That's it for this week. Thanks.